Hi, sweethearts. I have been learning a lot about boundaries over the last few years because I didn't have very healthy boundaries. And one of the interesting things that I discovered was that the most important boundaries are not the ones you set with other people. They're not the ones you set with your partner or your kids or your coworkers. They're the boundaries that you set with yourself. And at the deepest level, all boundaries, even the ones that feel like they're external, are on some level internal, personal boundaries that nobody can keep but you. Because boundaries are not to control anybody out there. It's not to control situations out there. It's for you to set your own personal boundary for what you will or will not participate in or tolerate. So if you set a boundary and you say, I will not stay engaged in conversations where I'm being yelled at or called names, that has nothing to do with the other person at that point. It's now your job to enforce that boundary. And if someone is disrespecting you, you do exactly what you told yourself you would do. You disengage. You walk away. You refuse to have a conversation where you're being yelled at or called names. It's that simple. Now, if that person is hounding you and following you and making you feel like it's impossible for you to keep your boundary, then it may take some creative problem solving to think, how can I honor this boundary even when it's difficult? If the person follows me as the next level of that boundary, that I will literally get in my car and leave the premises. I will turn off my phone. And I'm just giving an example. It could be anything. It could be, I had a friend who, her husband kept bringing their kid home very late. So he was overtired, he was upset, and he was really hard to get to bed. He was really easy to get to bed if you put him to bed on time. But if you waited till he was because he was very young, and if you waited till he was just overtired and just overwrought, it's really hard to get him to sleep. But the husband would bring him home late, he'd be out of control, the child would be out of control, and the husband would still want his wife to put the child to bed. And the wife said, look, I'm happy to put him to bed. I enjoy it. It's part of our bedtime routine. It's pleasant if he's going to bed on time. So here's my boundary. If you get him home on time, because it's not like it was something unavoidable. It was like the husband just not realizing how important it was to his wife. He was just taking him to the park and staying too long, going and visiting friends, staying too long. It wasn't like emergency situations. So she said, look, I respect that you get to you're an adult, you're a grown-up. This is your child too. So here's my boundary. If he's home on time for bed, I will put him to bed. I'll do all the work. I'll do everything. Bath time, story time, brushing, flossing, everything. But if you bring him home after his bedtime, I'm not putting him to bed. That'll be your job. And I'm going to get in the car and I'm going to go to the local tea house and read my book. And I'll come home once he's asleep. Guess how many times she had to enforce her boundary? Once. Because she did it. The first time he brought him home just 10 minutes late, and the husband was like, well, I'm only 10 minutes late. But she knew that he would keep pushing that boundary if she didn't keep it. So she said, I know it's just 10 minutes and it's fine. And he's a great kid and you love putting him to bed too. And so you can do the bedtime ritual. It's fine. She got in the car, she left, just like she said she would. She wasn't a nag, she wasn't mean. And because she actually did it, and because her husband actually had to face the consequence of his own decision, he never brought him home late again, because he actually really appreciated that his wife was putting the child to bed for them. But it wasn't until he had to face the consequence that he actually started keeping the boundary. And sometimes codependents and people pleasers, they will do whatever they can to make it so that other people do not have to face the consequences of their own decisions, and so they don't learn and they don't change, and resentment builds up and nobody's happy. And that's not a great way to have a fantastic relationship. And that's not a great way to honor yourself. because you're actually helping other people when you teach them how to treat you through healthy boundaries where you keep the boundary and allow them to face the consequence. And there's a lot that we can talk about with boundaries. There's a concept of rigid boundaries where you're just so inflexible that the other person can't win, and that's not helpful. But then there's the really flexible, overly loose boundaries where you're not really keeping it, and so it ceases to be a boundary and the other person's always pushing them. There is that healthy medium, and everyone needs to figure out where that is for themselves. Because it's good to have some flexibility. Life happens, things come up. But if it's a pattern, then it may be a boundary issue. If it's a pattern of something happening that puts you at the short end of the stick, that makes you feel devalued, there's probably somewhere where a boundary needs to be applied. Thank you for listening. I love you. Talk to you soon.